Hello, welcome to the Non-Inkables channel. This is Q. In light of Into the Inklands coming out in about a week, at least at the local game stores, which I'm super excited for, I thought we could do a little recap of the lore of Lorcana up to this point based on what we've seen from the trailers, the website, and interviews with the creators. So kind of prequel part. There is a person called the Curator who created all of the technology behind Lorcana. The curator created the Great Illuminary, which is this contraption here, and it captures the story stars, which is the purple stuff, which are fragments of Disney stories. It also houses the reservoir of magical ink and serves as a source of power for all of Lorcana. So the curator who created this, his goal, that person's goal was to collect and reimagine classic Disney stories. This happens by harnessing the power of the story stars, purple stuff, pairing them with magical ink in a lore book, and then that creates glimmers. And glimmers are new versions of Disney characters that only exist in the world of Lorcana. The curator assembled a small group of apprentices to help create glimmers and lore books, and these apprentices were called the Lumineers. So that was a long, long time ago, and a lot of time has passed. The curator and the Lumineers are long gone, but the power within the Great Illuminary has awakened and summoned extraordinary and creative people, that would be us, to master the power of Lorcana's Lumineers. So our goal is to resume the work of the curator and the Lumineers and collect and preserve lore so that glimmers can roam the Illuminary once again. We do this by summoning glimmers to quest as we search for missing lore in a race against time and to protect the realm against threats. So there's 3 initial chapters that were developed together. The first chapter, Rise of the Floodborn, which are already out, and then Into the Inklands, which is coming out. Each chapter follows one of 3 Illumineers, Shanzay, Martin, and Venturo. The first chapter sets the scene. It shows Shanzay being magically transported to the Great Illuminary, where she then meets Martin and Venturo. They see the mechanism that collects the story stars. It leads them to an open book with a staff. The staff is known as an ink caster. Shanzay wields the ink caster and ink flows into the book. It combines with the story stars and it makes an image of Hercules. The power of the ink caster causes the image to rise from the book and form a glimmer of Hercules. The second chapter, Rise of the Floodborn, follows Martin. He finds a room covered in seaweed and black ink that contains a mysterious locked lore book. The lock calls out to him and his ink caster. So he takes his ink caster and he plays some musical notes, kind of like a guitar, and that unlocks the mechanism and releases a flood of ink. This ink goes everywhere. It sweeps through the Grand Illuminary and into the surrounding inklands and damages stuff. The characters or glimmers that get caught in this flood get shifted into their floodborn types. So an example from the trailer is Cinderella here. She's getting caught in the flood and she is transformed into her floodborn type, which is Cinderella Knight from her original princess form. So within Lorcana, there are 3 types of characters. There are storyborn characters. So those are as they appear exactly as they were from the story that they originated from, so like Cinderella Princess. There are dreamborn characters that are glimmers that are based in the stories but then altered and reimagined a little bit by the Illuminator. Then, third, there are floodborn characters, and they have been changed in surprising and unpredictable ways because they encountered this magical ink flood that Martin released. So they can become older, wiser, smarter, more powerful. An example from one of my favorite movies, which is Emperor's New Groove, is Yzma. So her storyborn character is Yzma without beauty sleep. It shows her with her face mask and her cucumbers, and she appears just like this in the movie when they're out camping, her and Kronk looking for Cusco. Her dreamborn version, on the other hand, is Yzma the alchemist. So in the movie, they have a secret lab. You see them in the secret lab, but you never actually see her like making any of the potions. So her dreamborn character, it's basically her making the potions because she's the alchemist. And then her floodborn version is Yzma, scary beyond all reason. So in this version, she gains a new ability called Cruel Irony. And when you play her, you get to shuffle another chosen character card into their player's deck, and that player draws 2 cards. So she's gained a whole new ability. Another example I want to go over is like Belle. So she has 2 storyborn personas. One is Belle the Bookworm, and one is Belle Strange but Special. So both of these appear in the movie. You see her as the Bookworm in the beginning, in her poor provincial town, and then you see her in this iconic yellow dress castle. So that's her storyborn form. Next is her dreamborn form, which is Belle the inventor, inventive engineer, I mean. And it definitely makes sense because her father Maurice is an inventor and she grows up with him, so she probably was tinkering with him. But we don't see any direct evidence of it in the movie. And then her floodborn persona here is hidden archer. So she's become an archer, essentially, and gained a new skill. I do like that her bows are, or her arrows are roses. So I like to think of it as storyborn is like, yeah, I remember seeing this in the movie. Dreamborn is like, that wasn't in the movie, but I could see it happening off screen. And Floodborn is like a new epic version of that character. So the third chapter, which is coming out in a week, is Into the Inklands. And based on the trailer, it seems to follow Venturo, the third Illuminator, as he searches for lost lore throughout the Inklands. So some interesting things that I noticed from the trailers. The three Illumineers have different types of ink casters. So Shanzay, the first one, has a staff. Martin, the second one, his looks like a staff, but he can use it like a musical instrument, possibly alluding to the fact that you can sing songs in the game, which makes sense. And then Venturo's ink caster is more of like an arm guard attachment. It kind of reminds me of when people used to attach their iPod or their phone to their arm during like running workouts. It also kind of reminds me of Chato's arm from the Bleach anime. Also, Martin's ink caster has wells of amber and emerald ink, which makes sense since his is a musical instrument and amber has all the singers and a lot of the songs in the game. Venturo's ink caster is ruby and sapphire, which means that Shanzay's ink caster would be steel and amethyst. And that kind of tracks with how the game works and how you can play 2 inks at a time. So here are just some definitions of jargon that goes along with Lorcana. So Lorcana is the card game, but it is also the name of the world that everything exists in. The Great Illuminary is in this picture, and it is the source of Lorcana's power. It holds the reservoir of magical ink, and it collects the story stars. And the story stars, again, are fragments of Disney stories. And then outside of the Great Illuminary is the Inklands, and that's just the area that is out there, which we will see, hopefully in this third chapter, Into the Inklands, with all the location cards. The curator is the creator who made everything, including the Great Illuminary. And the curator's goal was to collect and reimagine stories by harnessing the power of the story stars, aka Disney story fragments, pair them with magical ink in a lore book, and then create glimmers. And glimmers are new versions of the character that only exist in the world of Lorcana. The Illumineers originally was the name for the small group of apprentices under the curator that helped create the glimmers and the lore books. Now it is Shanzay, Martin, and Venturo, as well as those of us who are playing the card game. Lore book, that is the mechanism that combines the story stars with the magical ink to make the glimmers. And then there are the 3 types of characters that we went over. So storyborn, characters in the way they originally appear in the movie or whatever media they came from. Dreamborn, which are based in the story, but with a touch of imagination. And then Floodborn, which are characters that have been changed in surprising and unpredictable ways when they encountered the magical ink flood that Martin released. And then shift is a word to describe when characters change from their storyborn or dreamborn version into their floodborn version. So in the game, you can change a character that is storyborn or dreamborn that you've already played into their floodborn version for less ink. Okay, so that is all for me. I hope you guys are excited as I am for Into the Inklands to come out. Keep shuffling and don't get stuck with all non-inkables like I always do.